wartime interlude. Sweeping into display in front of us, the tiny Levier Cosmic Wind. And from the left-hand end, accompanying it for this routine, the Beaver.
Actually, the worst one for Cosmic Wind is
Yes, as Colin said to me, an interesting combination. I suppose one might say these are two of the boats we don't get to see very much at Duxford displays. Certainly they are both fairly rare birds. In fact, there's no other Cosmic Wind currently flying in the world. Like the mystery ship we saw earlier, the Cosmic Wind was designed for one purpose, and one team of designers and builders drawn from the Lockheed staff, the Cosmic Wind was the machine we came up with. The original three were built by Levier's company. It's a former winner, this aircraft, of the King's Cup Air Race in 1964, when it was flown by Dennis Hartus, and it won that year's British Air Racing Championship. But even though it was far from designed for aerobatics, it's always been a very good aerobatic performer, as we're seeing. And in 1964, Neil Williams flew it at that year's World Aerobatic Championships in Bilbao, where he performed well, even though it wasn't the most suitable airframe. When you see the Cosmic Wind going through its paces in front of us, just bear in mind that its Continental O200 engine gives it just 100 horsepower. Of course, power to weight ratio key with a tiny little aircraft such as the Anson.
Using left.
Extremely attractive pairing here. The lead aircraft, the Dragon Rapide, is camouflaged, and this very aeroplane played its own wartime role. This one dates from 1941. It was built as a Domini 1 at de Havilland Tackfield plant, serving initially with number 1 camouflage flight, Hendon, today the home of the RAF Museum London. But in the latter part of 1943, it was put back onto the Civil Register, transferred to an organisation known as the Associated Airways Joint Committee, and assigned to the Northern Division of Scottish Airways, who used it for scheduled services and ambulance flights. And it would have carried many diverse passengers during its operations up there in the Highlands and Islands. The camouflage was applied as, in effect, wartime regulation colours for civil aircraft, with the red, white and blue identifying stripes below the civil registration. And its regular route took it over the top secret at the time naval base at Scapa Flow. Behind it, the Avro Anson, which started out with a frontline role, namely as a twin-engine coastal reconnaissance land plane for RAF Coastal Command. It was the Royal Air Force's first monoplane. What we see here is actually a post-war mark, an Anson T-21 trainer that was built at Eden in Leeds in 1950. And it was an example of this mark that was one of the last on RAF strength, not being retired by the Southern Communications Squadron at Bovingdon until 1968. Well, earlier I mentioned the Air Transport Auxiliary. Rapides and Dominis and Ansons were used as air taxi aircraft, ferrying the ATA's ferry pilots to and from the ferry pools that were set up by that organisation in wartime. The ATA went on to ferry over 300,000 aircraft during its existence. It's perhaps most famed for the role played by female pilots, 166 of whom were accepted. And one of them, whose views on being accepted into the ATA were recorded some years ago by an IWM researcher was Lady Rosemary Ducrow.
And they all had this idea of putting on conditions on book to fly past this fighting aeroplane. But that died rather hard, and we had to fight every step. And then we had this falling responsibility weighing on it, because aeroplanes and English weather are both very chancy, awkward things.
The voice of the late Lady Rosemary Ducrow, one of the Air Transport Auxiliary's 166 female pilots during the Second World War. This was the last pass by the two aeroplanes in that formation.
Being done with. Official answer.
Having broken away, you can see a Mark I Anson, the example that was in service at the outbreak of World War II, in the airspace building amongst IWM Duxford's collection of significant British and Commonwealth aeroplanes. Mark Miller rolling out first then in the Dragon Rapide. Behind him, Ben Cox in the Anson. But now, it's time to hand over to Captain Johnny Long, who's going to tell us about our next contribution, which comes from the British Army Air Corps.